Today is December 16th, 2025 AD. The holidays are almost here, and even during the season of grace and Thanksgiving, the mainstream media, per usual, can't stop blaming Gen Z for something. This time, Gen Z is being blamed for ruining Christmas. Because we're not spending money, retailers who typically count on the seasonal holiday surge to really boost profits are complaining that they're not getting any consumer spending from young Gen Z customers. Gee, it's almost like paying your young workers such horrible dogshit wages is going to have a negative impact on how they'd actually even be able to afford to buy your products. Didn't think that one through, did you corporate chills? December 17th, 62 AD. The normally dark streets of ancient Rome lit up like a modern-day big city. They didn't have electricity yet, but this was such a big holiday that the Romans decorated the entire streets with beautiful candles and torches, allowing them to feast and party throughout the whole night. This festival was known as Saturnalia, one of the biggest holiday events in all of ancient Rome, and a historical precedent and inspiration to what we now know today as Christmas. Massive banquets were held where Romans and even their slaves would feast on the most decadent, indulgent Roman dishes featuring expensive meats, seafood, fruits, and breads. In fact, during Saturnalia, it was even tradition for Romans to do a role reversal where the masters would actually serve the slaves for these 7 days. And the slaves were allowed full reign to badmouth their masters in any way they wanted.
Damn, you're not even exaggerating, Phil. Roman slaves literally had it better than your average Gen Z today.
I know, right? But while typical Roman citizens and even their slaves were feasting on the richest foods like there was no tomorrow, the great Stoic philosopher Seneca was doing the exact opposite. You see, Seneca, despite his extraordinary wealth, spent his Saturnalias eating only the cheapest and most bland bread, barley, and water. Let's find out why he did this.
Barley porridge or a crust of barley bread and water do not make a very cheerful diet, but nothing gives one keener pleasure than the ability to derive pleasure even from that, and the feeling of having arrived at something which one cannot be deprived of by any unjust stroke of fortune. Prison rations are more generous. The man in the condemned cell is not so scantily fed as that by the executioner. To reduce oneself, then, of one's own free choice to a diet that no man has any real call to be apprehensive about, even if he is sentenced to death, that is an act of real spiritual greatness. To do this is truly to forestall the blows of fortune. So, my dear Lucilius, start following these men's practice and appoint certain days on which to give up everything and make yourself at home with next to nothing. Start cultivating a relationship with poverty, for no one is worthy of a god unless he has paid no heed to riches. I am not, mind you, against your possessing them, but I want to ensure that you possess them without tremors, and this you will only achieve in one way, by convincing yourself that you can live a happy life even without them, and by always regarding them as being on the point of vanishing.
Consumerism is the perfection of slavery. This is a very wise quote that has absolutely blown up on YouTube recently. The way modern society keeps you enslaved at your miserable job you hate is through pressures of endless, infinite consumerism. Through the pressures of constantly needing to buy new shiny objects, new designer clothes, new expensive cars, new toys for adults, essentially. As the quote from Fight Club put it perfectly, we buy stuff we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. It's very interesting to know how one of the wisest men in history 2,000 years ago, one of the wisest movie quotes from the 90s, and modern day wise old Gen Z all agree on the exact same thing. Now, it would be one thing if buying all these fancy new toys actually made us happy. But as we've all experienced, they don't. Sure, they might give us a temporary boost of happiness in the short term, but after a few days, a few weeks, maybe a month or two at best, You get used to it, you adjust, and you just stop caring about it so much. And now you're right back to where you started. You need yet another, even more expensive, shiny new object to rinse and repeat the process. And this in turn means you have to work even more shitty, miserable hours at your soulless 9 to 5 to be able to afford it. This is called hedonic adaptation. You've all experienced this before, not just when it comes to buying stuff, but also when it comes to life in general. It's not just a trap of our modern consumerist culture, it's kind of just a trap of human nature in general. Whether it's food, money, or personal accomplishments, anytime you experience a new high, a new pleasure, a new achievement, it feels good temporarily, without a doubt, but nothing really satisfies us forever, does it? So, what's the solution then? Is it just to move to a cave and become a monk, permanently meditating to remove all desires forever? Well, there's certainly nothing wrong with that, and if you have the fortitude and mental discipline to go that route, you seriously have my utmost respect. But let's face it, that route isn't very practical or realistic for most of us. So we're kind of crushed in a sandwich between two extremes here. On one end, we have endless consumerist hedonistic pleasure chasing, which we all know just leads to burnout and nihilism. On the other, we could simply become a peaceful, simplistic monk, which is lovely but not very practical for most of us. This is where Seneca's solution comes in. In my opinion, it strikes the absolute perfect middle ground that allows us to both enjoy life and escape the infinite consumerist cycle of slavery. Hey guys, real quick, we set a goal a while back to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and as you can see, with just a few weeks left, we're actually getting quite close here. So if you're new here and enjoying this content, definitely consider subscribing and helping us get closer to this magic number. Thanks a bunch, you guys are awesome. Part 3, the actual plan.
He's a slave, but he may have the spirit of a free man. He's a slave. But is that really to count against him? Show me a man who isn't a slave. One is a slave to sex, another to money, another to ambition. All are slaves to hope or fear. I could show you a man who has been a consul who is a slave to his little old woman, a millionaire who is the slave of a little girl in domestic service. I could show you some highly aristocratic young men who are utter slaves to stage artistes. And there's no state of slavery more disgraceful than one which is self-imposed. So you needn't allow yourself to be deterred by the snobbish people I've been talking about from showing good humor towards your slaves instead of adopting an attitude of arrogant superiority towards them. Have them respect you rather than fear you.
This is one of my favorite excerpts from Seneca's book, Letters of a Stoic. For one, it totally shatters the BS gaslighting from your boomer parents that we should be so grateful because we have it better than anyone in human history. Seneca was one of the most respected and influential philosophers in the Roman Empire, and he literally spoke about slaves with far more respect than a modern-day employer treats you. Once you compare the two, you realize that urban Roman slaves literally had it better than us. They worked 6 hours a day, had 100 holidays per year along with every Roman citizen. They were able to buy their freedom in a process known as manumission by their 30th birthday, and their masters literally served them during Saturnalia. But the other great point Seneca makes here is that to some level, we're all slaves to something. That's kind of just the nature of human existence. And it's very important to recognize that because that's the first step to freedom. When I was growing up, people would lose their minds when you compared work to slavery. How could you even say such a thing? But Gen Z had absolutely zero hesitation in labeling it wage slavery, which is exactly what it is. Instead of being a slave to your master legally, you're a slave to the wage that your modern-day slave master pays you. And now that we recognize it is indeed slavery, revolutions have been started to try and escape it. We might just escape wage slavery one day. In fact, the way things are going now, I really have faith we probably will at some point. But we'll never fully quite escape the slavery of human existence. As Seneca said, to some level, all of us are slaves to our desires, whatever they may be. Fame, ambition, money, etc. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Again, I'm not advocating to go all-out monk mode here, but what you can do is to occasionally take what I'll call reverse cheat days, where you essentially live like Seneca did during Saturnalia. And I actually tried this for myself for a few days before making this video, and I must say, the results were quite impressive. Part 4, the results. So I always live by the standard that if I'm not willing to do something myself, I'm not going to give advice to others to do it. So I wasn't going to make a video about this without first trying it myself. So for 2 days before making this video, I went into total Seneca mode. I only ate the simplest bread, oatmeal, and eggs with no spices or seasonings. And I must say, the results were quite impressive. For starters, there was absolutely no negative health consequences whatsoever. None. Now make no mistake, if you only ate bread, oatmeal, and eggs for an extended period of time, there would absolutely be serious malnutrition issues you'd run into. But the human body is generally designed to be able to handle short-term bursts of stress and adversity quite well. The second major benefit I noticed from this was, of course, my bank account. And this is actually very important and useful when we're living in times of such a horrible economy and ridiculous grocery prices. But it wasn't just that I was able to save more money on the 2 reverse cheat days, it reset my baseline pleasure experience threshold to where for the rest of the week, even the normal foods I usually eat on an everyday basis started to taste great again. And I didn't need the extra Coke here, the extra candy bar there, the extra bag of chips there, just to satisfy myself. And it was at this moment when I realized just how much money I was wasting on all this processed crap that was bad for my physical health on top of all that. Now, there were countless more positive benefits as well, but these are mostly what you'd expect, so I'm not going to drag on about it too much here. Mental clarity, better focus, better motivation, etc. It was kind of like the typical YouTube bro science of desexualizing your brain or a technology dopamine detox. But it just hit in such a more visceral, profound way for me. Since food is the most basic human need, being able to reset that baseline just fundamentally shook everything beyond that as well. Everything from gaming, to books, to making videos, it just became so much more enjoyable and so much less costly. It ended up being the perfect combination to combat all the crazy challenges we're dealing with in the modern world. It was the solution to everything from inflation to nonstop dopamine scrollings on social media. But that's just my own personal experience with it all. If any of you ever decide to try this, I'm really curious. Let me know in the comments how your experience went. Conclusion. So, escaping any form of slavery is not going to be easy, for the simple fact that a lot of rich and powerful people are dependent on your slave labor in order to stay rich and powerful. But it's not just the elites in power who want to keep you enslaved. Sometimes, surprisingly, it's your own fellow slave with the crabs in a bucket mentality. This isn't just an expression, it's a real phenomenon where actual crabs will really pull each other back into the bucket if they see someone escaping because, well, misery loves company. And nowhere is this more apparent today than when you see broke people defending billionaires and capitalism all the time, even when they're directly being hurt by them. The crabs in a bucket mentality can't physically chain you to a ball anymore, but they will absolutely try and do it psychologically speaking. And the main psychological tool they try to use to keep you enslaved is shame, guilt, and humiliation. Oh, you're just jealous because you're a broke loser. Oh, you're just lazy and you don't want to work hard. And my favorite one, in the most cringe, wannabe, alpha male voice imaginable, oh, you're just coping, bro. You're just coping. So I really wonder what they're all going to say when the greatest minds and philosophers in all of human history actually agree with us and think their logic is totally stupid and ridiculous. Cicero is another great Roman philosopher who influenced the very foundations of American republicanism itself. He specifically said that working for a wage is the worst, most tyrannical form of slavery ever, and he's someone who witnessed literal Roman slavery every day of his life. Epictetus wrote an entire book about how stupid and pointless playing these meaningless games of status and money are. When you look back through time in history, the evidence is clear. Most of the greatest thinkers ever agree with Gen Z. Most of the greatest thinkers ever would think this modern, consumerist, capitalist society is an absolute ridiculous abomination, and they're right about that. Now, if you want to see some real-life examples of how young people are using this knowledge to actually break out of this slavery consumption cycle, we covered a very inspiring example in this video right here. Check it out. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.